On today's episode, I am at Hospice Compassus at their Davenport location, and I'm going to visit with Jill Venden, and she's going to talk about a little history of Hospice Compassus and also the need for volunteers, and especially in Southeast Iowa. So, Southeast Iowa audience, I hope you, if you're one who is so inclined, that you consider volunteering. And this episode is brought to you by Griner Auto Body of Washington, Iowa, using state-of-the-art techniques and decades of experience to get your car back on the road after an accident. Car Doctor of Washington, Iowa, no matter who Frankensteined it, they can fix and clean and customize it. McDonald Boneyard of Keota, Iowa, for all of your farm equipment and auto recycling needs. Girling Repair of Winfield, Iowa. If your mower is dead, call Fred, your Husqvarna, Aaron's, and Gravely dealer. B&B Propane and the family of Jet Stops. And Blue Dog Lawn Care of Wayland, Iowa, for all your residential and commercial lawn care needs. And when that snow starts flying, they'll move that for you too. They all present Southeast Iowa today. I'm John Bain, author of Christie's Journey, The Beat Goes On, and your host. Let's go visit with Jill. Jill, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We are here in Davenport, Iowa at Hospice Compassus, and we are going to talk about Southeast Iowa today and the need for volunteers, and maybe in other parts of Iowa as well. But before we do that, can you share with myself and with my audience what all Hospice Compassus does?
Sure. Thank you, John. We are in Iowa as well as 30 other states across the United States. So here in Iowa, we have 4 offices, and we're actually expanding into Des Moines as well. So there will be a 5th office. Wow. But we're here in Davenport today. I have an office in Washington, Iowa, one in Cedar Rapids, and one in Cedar Falls. And what our hospice does is we take care of people at end of life. So as clients come to end of life and they need additional care and help, either by caregivers in home because they want to stay home, or in long-term care facilities like nursing homes, our team comes in and takes care of those clients to make sure that they're comfortable and they have all their needs fulfilled in those last, it could be days, months, 6 months.
And when I heard that word clients and the fact that those people are at their end of life, it's also their families.
Absolutely, that's a great point. We don't just treat our clients, we treat their families as well. And when a client comes on to our services, we meet with their family, we talk about their needs, where that client is actually in that disease process and such. And we educate the family also on what's to come, what they should expect. And then we follow up with that family. We have a bereavement coordinator. We have a chaplain. We have nurses and social workers, all those things that are put in line, not just the nurses and the aides. And then, of course, volunteers that come and visit with clients to kind of keep them, socially and spiritually content. And when I say that time frame, it's from when they come on to our bereavement coordinator follows the family for 13 months after the family member or loved one has passed. And I always find that such an interesting thing. And when I was training to become a volunteer coordinator, one of the questions I asked was, 13 months, what does that mean? Yeah. Well, that's 1 month after the anniversary of their passing.
Of a year.
Yeah, so that might be visiting with them. And my volunteers can do the same thing. They can also visit with the bereaved. So.
Well, one thing I've learned, hospice, when someone goes into hospice, it doesn't always mean they've only got days left or weeks. Sometimes they've got months, and sometimes they've got really great days, and sometimes they've got really horrible days, and everything in between. Am I on the right track with that?
You are absolutely on the right track. The perception, like you say, of hospice is, oh gosh, they're going to be with us a week to a month. and that's not the case at all. To come on hospice, and you have to have a diagnosis of 6 months or less to live. Well, no one has that magic ball to say, oh, you have 6 months to live, or we've had clients on for a year and a half or 2 years, but with that, because Medicare pays for hospice for the most part, they have to be qualified and requalified to have our services. So our team, we meet every other week to make sure where our clients are in the disease process, and that they still qualify for the hospice services through Medicare. So,
and that's something that, we have to prepare for everything in life. I mean, my grandfather, when he was at that point where he was going to be passing away and we would be visiting, he'd say, the day you're born, you're destined to die.
mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, but I don't want you to tell me that right now, Grandpa.
Grandpa, no.
But I mean, we have so much that we have to prepare for in all of our living lifetimes, that sometimes when it comes to this part of it, we're not as equipped as we are as buying insurance or whatever. And you folks walk people through this process in a way that helps that ease their minds and give them a little relief from the stress that they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like you said, no one wants to, for the most part, as Americans, we don't want to talk about end of life,
Right.
Because it's uncomfortable. But yeah, that's what our team does, and helps the person who's at end of life, as well as the families, get things in order. That's what our social workers do, and our RNs and our chaplains and such, and just to make sure that they know things are going to be taken care of. Because sometimes we'll have clients that want to stick around a little bit, and we have to let them know things are okay, and maybe they want to go on and be with their loved ones who have left us beforehand. So just being sure that we are treating the whole family and making sure that they are comfortable and ready for that next journey.
And in order for you to do that, you have to have some volunteer help.
Yes.
And explain to us why the volunteer portion is so important, as far as what's Hospice Compassus has to do with regulations, if that's the right word, or there may be another term for it, but as far as volunteerism and that sort of thing, and just why in general it's so important.
Sure. Our volunteers they can do just about anything, and so as I recruit for more volunteers, I'm looking for people who have different types of skills, play music, do other things. But how volunteering really came about was when hospice came over here from England. It was purely volunteer. Everyone took care of the loved ones till end of life. There wasn't people that came in and took care of that. So as part of Medicare is that pays for hospice care, they wanted to keep that volunteer portion of it. So 5% of our billable hours, all those hours, have to be met with volunteer hours. So that's kind of my goal every month, is to make sure that I meet that 5%. But in addition, that I always want to know that if a client wants a volunteer, that I can make that happen. And so in the southeast Iowa area, it's very vast. Our Washington office is growing and growing and growing. And as we move south down to Ottumwa and Keokuk, all those communities, I need volunteers to be able to meet those needs. And maybe it's what we call the gift of presence. Maybe a family member can't get back up here as their loved one is facing those end of days, and they just want a volunteer to be able to be present. Sit with them, listen to music. As we come to those last days, they might sleep 18 to 22 hours
That's
a day.
what I was going to ask, yes.
Yeah, so if they're sleeping that time, they just want to know someone's in the room there to comfort them.
And when they wake up, they see a friendly person.
Yeah, a friendly face. Maybe they're playing music. Maybe they're praying for them. It's that spectrum. Everyone has many talents, and maybe it's just what I call gift of presence. Maybe just sitting there reading a book contently, while someone else rests. It's nice to know someone with a nice, warm, smiling face is in the room.
Now, a volunteer like that, you're not like a nurse at that point. You're just there to do with the things that you described.
Right. So our volunteers go through a background screening. Obviously, that's very important to make sure that we have the right people in place. We do trainings. We have 9 modules that we go through, everything about volunteering, about our team, what volunteers might see, what disease processes they might see. We have a whole module or training on Alzheimer's and dementia, which can be really hard for people, understanding that. So as we go through that training, they also have to have a TB test, and you do have to be 18 years of age.
Okay.
We have no cap. I have had volunteers, or I have current volunteers in their mid 80s.
Wow.
That continue. That volunteer work really.
And I would think that might be if the patient or the client is more seasoned, elderly, that might be a comfort to have someone that's more like a peer in that regard.
And if I have enough volunteers, I really try to match those people up. If I have a retired teacher that's on our services, and I have a volunteer that's a retired teacher, or a farmer, etc., I really like to bring those people together because they can talk about those things. And our volunteers learn how to communicate with those on our services.
And that's really neat because when you think about it, when we're all feeling good, and when do we feel our best is when we get to talk to people that have common interest and stuff. So that's really important.
And we're always looking for people that have musical skills, massage therapy, it's all out there. Anyone can come and volunteer, and I never want people to think that, oh gosh, you're coming on as a volunteer and you're going to have to volunteer 5-10 hours a week. I have volunteers that are an hour to 2 hours a month.
Okay.
I assign you and you visit maybe twice a month. Once you get through that orientation, then you set the time that you go and visit. That's on you as a volunteer. I would never tell someone, well, you have to be there at 1 o'clock on Tuesdays.
Right.
As a volunteer, that you work it into your schedule when you can visit with the clients.
Now, Jill, if I know my audience, and sometimes I feel like I do, because sometimes they just watch the heck out of some episodes, but what I was going to say is there's somebody in the audience right now that's saying, well, tell us how to volunteer. You haven't told us how to or where to volunteer. So tell us what's this, if someone's watching this or listening right now and would like to be a volunteer for Hospice Compassus, how do they get that process started?
Absolutely. They can either reach out to me, and provide you with my cell phone number. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
So I can put that on the screen?
Absolutely.
Well, right now they're seeing it on the screen.
Great.
Yeah.
Or you can go to compassus.com/volunteers and look up the Iowa offices.
Okay.
You can call the Washington office as well. Or if you're more in tune, you're online and you go to volunteermatch.com. There's also, I guess we would call them advertisements for the different areas, like Fairfield and Fort Madison and Montrose and Wayland and Wellman. So
that's where my audience is.
And Washington, of course.
Yeah, I got to say hello to all those folks in all those towns. It was wonderful that you named those off at the same time. How long have you been working for Hospice Compassus?
It's been a little over 6 years. It's been an amazing transition. I was in for-profit education, and it kind of just worked for me. I used to set up internships for students. Well, now I get to use that education piece and train, as well as some of my medical background, and help people in need at end of life. So.
Wow. Now, at the end of each day, when you go home, you think, what was the best part of my day? When you have a great day, what's the best part of your day?
I think the best part of my day, number one, is knowing that we are helping people. And the other thing is I get to touch base with my volunteers. I was just on a little vacation and my boss said, do you feel like it's harder when you're gone because you're disconnected from your volunteers? And absolutely. I make phone calls to 2 or 3 of my volunteers, making sure they're okay. Everything is they need, all their needs are being met. But just knowing that we're helping people, and it's very, very fulfilling, I guess, what I do.
I can tell. I can really tell. We visited a little bit before we started rolling the camera, and I just know that you're a great person. And I met a couple ladies in the front office, and they're just smiles and just good people. And can you tell us on between all the towns that you're in Iowa, you're also in different states too, right?
Yes.
What's an average office employee as far as people?
Well, I guess depending on our census, and I guess right now, across Iowa, we have about usually averaging between 170 and 180 clients that we're visiting.
Wow.
With, and like I said, that Washington team is really growing. So in each office, we usually have 2 or 3 case managers, which are RNs, and occasionally have an LPN. We have 3 chaplains across Iowa, 2 bereavement coordinators. We have social workers in each one of our offices, hoping I don't miss anyone. And of course, the ladies that run our offices, and then our bosses.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, and the reason I asked that is I wanted to underscore to the folks that are either watching or listening that there is a need for volunteers, because the human resources can only go so far.
Right.
And so it was important to point that out. Really appreciate having this time to discuss this and share with people what Hospice Compassus does, not only in Southeast Iowa, but across the country. And before I wrap up, I always like to ask my guest, because we're already at 16 minutes and 8 seconds of podcast excellence, I call it, because you've been a great guest and it's an important topic. But before we wrap up, I would like to ask you, Jill, if there was anything that I should have asked you about that we haven't discussed that you would like to share with the audience.
I'm so glad you asked, because as I'm looking around my office and looking at all the American flags I have in here, we also have a program. It's Veterans Helping Veterans. So we look for volunteers that are veterans that are willing to visit with our clients that are also veterans. So it's kind of special. Number one, something that we do is we honor our veterans. It's very important to us. If we find out they have served our country, that we will do what we call a pinning ceremony, and we get the information about their time in service.
Wow.
And we go and we make it a celebration, and we give them a pin and a little medal and a flag set, and we just talk about their time in service if they'd like to share that information.
Right. I'll tell you, in my experience, especially the older veterans now. When I was a kid, it was like there were some World War I and World War II veterans. Now our World War II veterans, the ones that were left, they're in their 90s.
Absolutely.
And
it's amazing to get to see and visit with them.
Yes, and the Vietnam veterans that from my dad's age, they're in their 80s, 70s and 80s now. But a lot of times, especially the Korean War, which my father-in-law was a veteran of, and the Vietnam War, a lot of times because the whole politicizing that goes on with all this, our veterans were not treated as they should have been, and it's no fault of their own. They served their country, and they need to be welcomed home. A lot of them never were, and I always say welcome home.
I think that's a great point you just made, because One of our chaplains, he's a 20-year veteran of the Army, and he does a lot of those ceremonies, and that's what he'll say. He'll say, especially those World War II vets, they'll say, "No one ever thanked me," and will weep as we go through this process. So that's why it's also nice to have veterans that are volunteers that are able to visit with our clients, because they speak a different language. They
Yes.
know the terms, and maybe they never talked about their time in service, but boy, someone that had just served, maybe 20 years ago, they're able to kind of talk them through that, and maybe they didn't forgive themselves for some things, and that's what our veteran volunteers do.
And also they can joke with them, and they can talk about eating you know what on a shingle. Yeah.
Lovely rations.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So, well, that's what I'm here for today, is to help you get this word out. And I think you've done a great job, a great ambassador of the need and the importance of volunteering. So we had that information on the screen. We said it out loud. If you're listening and you didn't see it, back this podcast up and replay it. And if you saw it and didn't take time, back it up, pause it, and look at the screen. Jill, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you, John.
It's so important that we have folks like the folks here at Hospice Compassus when life gets hard and at the end of life season as well. It's important for the person that's going through it and the loved ones that are going through it too. I want to thank Jill again for being on the program, and I want to thank you for watching. I also need to thank our sponsors, Griner Auto Body, Car Doctor, McDonald Boneyard, Girling Repair, B&B Propane, and the family of Jet Stops, and Blue Dog Lawn Care. I'm your host, John Bain. Stay friendly, Southeast Iowa.